At 26, I quit my 9 to 5 job, my corporate job, and this is 6 months later. And chances are, if you're watching this video, you're trying to do the same thing. Quit that job that you hate and start a business. And so I'm gonna share with you my experience, my story, and how I got to this point right now. I'm making like $10,000 to $20,000 a month with a small business. So for a bit of context, I went to college to study business, and it's kind of funny when I say it out loud, it sounds silly, but I went to college to learn business. That's my degree, commerce, and I was learning business from professors who had never run a business. And so just very silly. But anyways, I bought into the whole college thing. I thought it was going to be worth it. I thought by the time I was going to graduate, I was going to be making 6 figures with a good job. I just bought into the whole thing. I was a good student. I had good grades, all that stuff. So after 4 years, I got my degree and I was ready to start looking for jobs. And this is kind of when I had my first big realization. This is kind of when I realized that I was screwed. So I graduated around COVID. A lot of businesses were laying off people and I couldn't find any jobs. My big first realization is I'm not gonna be making 6 figures like I was promised, like I was sold on this idea of college. So I finally was able to get a job. I was gonna be making like $38,000 a year. I quickly realized that I was not gonna be making nearly 6 figures a year. So fast forward a couple years, I had been working that job for maybe 3 years at that point, and that's when I had my second big realization. This is when I realized that I had to quit. So this was one night and I was checking my bank account on my phone and I realized something that it sounds stupid when I say it out loud, but I hadn't realized this, that 3 years had gone by since I started working that job, but I was just as broke as when I had started. So I realized that something was really wrong. I was still broke, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, I had no savings, nothing to show for, and it had passed 3 years and I had been stuck at this job. That's kind of when I had my second big realization. And this was a very depressing time for me. I had like a 1 or 2 weeks that I was very depressed, but that's kind of when I decided to make a change. Either I was gonna stuck in this job for the next 40 years, be miserable, be broke, or I was gonna bet on myself and start a small business to make it out. This next period is when I locked in. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day just with the 9 to 5 job that I had, the corporate job, and then I was building the business as a side hustle. And the business that I decided to start at the time was a web design agency. That's the only skill that I had. I knew how to build websites. And so I thought, why don't I just help businesses with their websites, helping them build their websites and charging them like $1,000, $2,000 for a website. So how I launched my business was with cold outreach. Any cold outreach you can think of, I probably tried it myself. Facebook group, Instagram DMs, Facebook DMs, cold emails, cold calls, all that stuff, I tried it myself. And I would love to tell you that that was an instant success, but in reality, it didn't happen like that. And so I was cold calling strangers, and this was a nightmare. I would grab like a list of businesses and I'll just call them one by one, trying to pitch them on my web design services. But the problem is everybody hates cold calling. So these people would cuss me out, go fuck yourself. They would just say a bunch of crazy stuff on the phone and it just didn't work that well. Eventually, I just kept going, kept trying, and I was doing this like 4 to 6 hours every day, just doing cold outreach, trying to sign web design clients after my 9 to 5 job. So eventually kind of started working. I was getting like $500 clients, $1,000 clients. I was making like $500 to $1,000 extra every month. Now, it wasn't nearly enough for me to quit my job. Don't get me wrong, like $500 not nearly enough. And what also happened is I was fully burnt out. I hated the agency. I hated cold calling people, getting cussed out, all this stuff. And so I kind of burnt out. This is when I realized that I had to go back to the drawing board and I had to find a new way to run my business. And so I had a service, I had a skill, I knew web design. I just needed to find a way to get clients more efficiently. Getting clients was a pain in the ass, but even the clients that I was getting, those cheap clients, were always a nightmare. And so that's when I started my YouTube channel around web design. And for me, this changed everything. My first ever video on that channel got 17 views in one day. And when this happened, like I still remember this to this day, I couldn't believe it. I was like 17 strangers found out about my business without me needing to cold call one by one. And you might think 17 views is not that much, but for me at the time, that meant everything. I just couldn't believe the leverage that I was getting with YouTube. Next month, I had my first 20 subscribers. So I gained 20 subscribers in the first month. Absolutely crazy. And I just kept going. I just kept making YouTube content about web design. And this is how I started scaling my business. This is how I started getting clients, attracting clients to my business. Now I kept going, and at this point I had 96 subscribers, and that month is the first month that I ever made $8,000 in a single month. Now you might be wondering, how is that even possible? But the thing is, with YouTube, you can attract clients to your business and you can get clients faster than if you're just doing cold outreach. And so 96 subscribers, $8,000 in my first month. Now I've made a video in more detail, you can watch it later, but that's how I did my first $8,000 in a single month. Now I kept going, and at this point I was making between $6,000 to $12,000 a month with the YouTube channel, with my business, selling websites to business owners through YouTube. And this is when I decided I need to make a plan to quit my job. I'm making more money with the business, spending less time on the business, and it's making me more than my corporate job, my 9 to 5, where I was making like $5,000 a month. I'm making 6 to 12 just with the business. So my plan was, I need 6 months worth of savings, like a runway, and then 6 months worth of consistent income with the business. Because a lot of people say just quit right away and go for it, but for me, I value safety. I wanted to make sure that this was scalable and it was consistent, and that I had enough savings. So if something happens, something goes wrong, I at least have some savings to keep me going. And for me, I tend to operate and make better decisions when I have an abundance mindset. And so if I'm worried about money, then I'm gonna make poor decisions with the business. So I wanted to have enough cash, enough consistency, and make sure that I was making like 6 to 10K on average every month for 6 months straight. Now the next part is when I actually quit my job. And so I did both of those things. I had the savings and I had the consistency with the business. And this is when I messaged my manager on Slack. So I sent her a message and I told her if we could just do a quick meeting. There was something that I had to tell her. This was about 4 years into the corporate job. So keep in mind, I decided to quit like 3 years in, but it took me time to get the business going, failing, making mistakes, cold outreach, now with YouTube. So now it's 4 years in. And so I hopped on the call with the manager and I kind of told her like this wasn't the right fit for my career, this stuff. I thanked her for the opportunity, all this stuff. And to my surprise, she just says, okay, cool. Like she wasn't happy and she didn't thank me like for my 4 years of working here. That's kind of when I realized that at a corporate job, you're just a number. She literally didn't give a fuck that I was quitting. She didn't care about me whatsoever. And that's when I realized that when you're working a corporate job, you're just a number and they literally don't care about you. So I quit my job that day, no backup plan. And since then, I've just been running my agency with the YouTube channel, getting clients, helping them with their websites and all that stuff. So 6 months later, this is me right now. I quit my job 6 months ago, and this is kind of what happened since then. And so for me, the hardest part about quitting my job was just that feeling of being scared about money, about not making money with the business, about the unknown. And even though I hated my job and I knew that I was broke, that was the thing that was holding me back. And it was just that paycheck that you know you're gonna get every 2 weeks. You know you're gonna be making that money even though you're broke, but it's kind of that safety. And so that's kind of what kept me in that job for a little while until I had those big realizations. But the thing is, those ways of thinking only got me up until that point. And in order to get to the next point, I had to rewire my brain and start thinking differently. Start thinking as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and kind of leave behind those old ways of thinking. And so now that I quit, I was able to pretty much like double my income fairly quickly within like 6 months, making 5K a month, now making like 10 to 15K a month. And that was just like insane. At that job, that would have been impossible. They were giving like 2% annual raises, which is just like inflation. So you're pretty much making less money year after year. Now that I quit my job, I was able to just double my income, which would have been impossible if I had stayed at that job. The main pros of not quitting is quote unquote the safety of staying there. But for me, I didn't even have that. And so I was at a big company, but every quarter they were having huge layoffs. The company wasn't doing well. And so every quarter I was kind of scared that I was going to get laid off. So for me, I didn't even have that safety of keeping my job and not making that much. For me, it was like every quarter I might be laid off. And I think I survived like 3 or 4 rounds of layoffs, but it was just like pure luck. Now the pros of quitting is just freedom, making more money, 2, 3, 4 times as much as you could make at a corporate job. And also like doing cool stuff with my time, stuff that I couldn't do before because I didn't have enough money to buy stuff. So I picked up golf in my 20s. I started doing snowboarding like for the first time, and now I'm pretty good at it. I go to Banff, I snowboard, I play golf around my house. Like I do some cool stuff. And sure, I'm not rich, like I'm only making 10 to 20K a month, but I think you get a really cool lifestyle around 10 to 20K a month. You can do cool stuff, travel. I'm going to Florida in a few months. So, you know, it's just really cool stuff that you can do. If you're thinking about quitting your job, you have to be able to see the potential of what you could be doing. And you have to understand like, what are you losing, the safety, and kind of letting go of those stuff. Now, of course, I'm not gonna say everything's perfect. I'm not gonna paint this picture of becoming an entrepreneur, all this stuff, quitting your job is going to be perfect. We've had some really tough moments with the business. I run my business with my brother. We've had some very difficult times as well. So it's not going to be perfect, and there's pros and cons, but for me, it just made way more sense to quit that job and just go for it. Now, after watching this story, watching my journey, you might be thinking, how do I know if I'm ready to quit my job? So there's 3 things that you should be asking yourself. These are 3 things that I asked myself before I quit my job, and this is kind of how I decided if I was ready to quit my job. The first one is, do you currently have a skill or some sort of specialized knowledge that you can build a business around it so that you can replace your income from your 9-to-5 job? 2 ways to think about it is, it could be related to your job. So let's say you're an accountant, you could build an accounting business around that skill you already have, which kind of makes sense with your current job. For me, it was the complete opposite. I do accounting, bookkeeping, that kind of stuff, and I wanted to stay away from that. So I created a new business around another skill that I had, which was web design. So you can kind of pick. I know a lot of people in the corporate world have tons of skills they could build a business around, but for me, it just didn't make sense. So I had to pick something else. Now, the second thing that you should think about is, does your business currently make as much as your income or more so that you can replace your job? If the answer is no, you're not making enough, you're making $1,500, I have some more technical videos in the YouTube channel, you can check them out, as to how you can scale your business quickly so that you're making at least the same or more than your current job. And the last one for me is peace of mind. Do you currently have savings just in case anything happens? Can you make that transition? And if something happens, do you have savings to keep you going? Do you have a runway of X amount of months to keep you going? So for me, this was 6 months of runway. So how I calculate my runway is just add up all of your expenses, rent, food, utilities, insurance, car payments, all that stuff, add it up and then times that by 6. And that's how much savings I had saved up. And that's my runway of 6 months. And so that's how I quit my job at 26. And this is 6 months later. If you're thinking about it, I have some more in-depth tutorials in the YouTube channel that you might want to check out. I'll leave it right here.